Hi, I'm Kathy Hoshijo. I'm getting ready to serve a sushi buffet for a dinner party. And it makes a nice, beautiful dinner party that doesn't take much work and is a real kind of a casual thing that friends and family can sit around. Come into the kitchen and I'll show you how to make the very center of the sushi buffet, and that is the rice. Actually, the Japanese diet is centered around rice, and when you use brown rice instead of white rice, it's a really healthy thing to do. To start off the sushi rice, I've got 10 cups of water here, and it's just on a very light simmer. I'm going to go ahead and turn it up to come to a high boil so I can put the rice in. But what I like to do with my rice water before I actually put the rice in is lightly simmer about 1 ounce of these dried shiitake mushrooms in the water. This is what they look like before they go in the water. And as you can see, they're nice and crisp and crunchy and not very palatable. So I put them in the water to reconstitute them, and they have a really, really nice flavor. So the flavor goes into the rice water as well. And I'm going to reserve these reconstituted mushrooms to put in the rice later. But into the 10 cups of water, we'll go 4 cups of brown rice. And this makes a lot of rice. This makes almost 12 cups of cooked rice. And actually, this sushi salad that I'm going to show you how to make is an excellent way to get rid of any cold leftover rice as well. And if you're going to make this with cold leftover rice, if you ever have 10 cups of leftover rice, you might just eliminate this step of boiling the mushrooms in the water and instead soak the mushrooms in just enough water to barely cover them, and use that soaking water to simmer some vegetables in, which I'm going to do in a little bit. But before I do that, let me show you some other steps that are better to do before you actually simmer the vegetables. First, take your cooked rice that's been cooled at least to room temperature and put it in a large mixing bowl. Uh-oh. There we go. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm using brown rice here instead of white rice. So that means that this is a really nutritious dish. It's not just an empty calorie. You know, a lot of times people have the false idea or the mistaken idea that carbohydrates are fattening, but they really aren't if you use whole complex carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are fattening because the fiber is taken out of them, as well as all the valuable nutrients. So all you have basically left is a calorie with no nutrient. But complex carbohydrates, like brown rice, which contain all the fiber, actually aren't fattening at all. It's actually very hard to eat a lot of brown rice because of the fiber. The fiber just makes you feel full. If you just sit down and try to eat a bowl of brown rice and compare it to 2 or 3 or even 4 bowls of white rice, you'll find that you can eat the white rice very easily because there isn't any fiber in it, and it doesn't make you feel bulky or full. So anyways, into this brown rice, I'm just going to toss a dressing. And this is a real simple dressing and completely oil-free. This particular dressing is made with a 1/4 cup of rice vinegar, 5 tablespoons of water, 2 tablespoons of honey, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now this gets poured over the rice like this, and you'll want to toss it in. Of course, that can be done later when everything else is tossed in. And by everything else, I mean some of the following ingredients, or all of them if you wish. And of course, you can use your imagination on the other ingredients that go in, depending on what's available to you. The first thing that I do for topping off this rice is to boil some age or aburagi. I never learned to talk Japanese, unfortunately, but some aburagi triangles. And this is what they look like when they're uncooked. They can be bought in most Japanese grocery stores and in a lot of grocery stores, just supermarkets. And what age strips are they're deep-fried tofu. So this is the tofu inside, and it just gets nice and crisp and brown on the outside. So if you can't find these, you can always use tofu in place of them. Anyways, what I usually do, though, is boil the agi like this, just so the excess oil gets taken out. And then after it's boiled, just take the agi and squeeze it out like this, just like a sponge. And you can be rather rough with it, and it won't break up. It'll just remain nice and in one piece. Then you just take it and cut it into strips. And I like to use, for this amount of rice, about 2 cups worth of strips. Now I think what I'll do is remove this pot of rice and use this flame to cook the agi strips and a few other things as well. And I'm going to cook it in 2 tablespoons of water, along with some soy sauce and honey. And this helps to basically just kind of season both the agi strips and the mushroom. These mushrooms that I pulled out of the rice soaking water just get cut into strips like this. And these get put, this is 1 ounce worth of the reconstituted mushrooms. They get put along with the agi strips into the soy sauce, honey, and water mixture. And this just needs to kind of simmer like this, just for about a minute or so. The idea is just to let it soak up a tiny bit of that soy sauce and honey flavoring. Now, if you look closely on the bottom of this pot, you can see that most of the liquid has been soaked up by both the mushrooms and the age or aburagi strips. So now it's time to remove them, but the best thing to do is do that off of the heat so that the heat doesn't evaporate the little bit of liquid that's left on the bottom. And what you want to do is use a slotted spoon or something like this wok straining spoon and squeeze out as much of the liquid from your age and mushrooms back into the pot. And this can go straight into the rice that's been seasoned with the light dressing. Now this age, or the aburagi, is a really good source of protein because it's made from tofu. And when used with the brown rice, it makes a really good, nutritious balance. Now once these are all squeezed out, the remaining liquid can be used to simmer different vegetables in. And I'll do 2 cups of freshly and very prettily cut carrots first. And the idea is to cook these carrots in this tiny, tiny little bit of sauce until they start turning a brighter orange than they are when they're raw. That's one thing nice about Japanese cooking, is they never overcook vegetables. Just enough to make them a little bit more tender. And as you'll notice, the carrots are also cut into pretty flower shapes because the Japanese like to make the food very attractive as well as nice tasting. So the carrots can just be drained out like this and put back into the rice. And into this water, I'm going to put 1 cup of very thinly slivered green beans, which get cooked in the same way the carrots did. And while those are cooking, I'll add to the rice 2 cups of peas. Now, if you're using fresh peas, you're going to have to simmer them like the beans and the carrots. But if you use frozen peas, that's not necessary because the peas were a tiny bit simmered before they were frozen. So you can just toss them in like this. The beans should be done by now. As you can see, it doesn't take very long to cook these vegetables at all. They just need to cook until they turn a real bright color. Now these vegetables can get tossed into the rice mixture now, and this is like a sushi rice salad. Just like this. Just want to toss all those ingredients till they get thoroughly tossed together, and then they're ready to put into the serving utensil. And of course, because this is for a party, this is a really huge amount. If you want to try this just for a family dinner, just cut down on the amount in the recipe. This is the center dish, though, and so we want to decorate it nicely with some crumbled up, toasted nori seaweed and some toasted sesame seeds. And this is your center dish. This is a nice sushi salad, around which you'll serve all kinds of other things. One of the things that you can serve as a side dish to the salad is a spinach salad. And this is a Japanese version of a spinach salad. It's real interesting to note that not only in Japan, but in China and quite a few countries around the world, when they speak of salads, they're not speaking of raw vegetables like I often think of, but they usually very, very lightly cook the vegetables. And that's what I'm going to do with this spinach. I'm going to lightly blanch it. Now, to prepare the spinach for blanching, you're going to want to wash it really well, because spinach usually grows in kind of a sandy, loamy soil. It usually has a lot of dirt and sand on it, so rinse it off really well. And don't cut the stems off. Just leave the stems on the roots, just like this, because that's going to give you a handle. And then just gather the roots together in your hands the best you can and stick this whole bunch. This is actually 2 big bunches of spinach, which is equal to probably a pound or so. Just dip it into some boiling water and leave it in there. And you're going to want to just kind of keep your eye on the spinach, because this takes just a real short time. As you can see, as I'm doing this, the spinach begins to wilt a tiny bit. Whoops, I'm losing a few roots here. It begins to wilt a little bit. I lost some. It's good to have tongs in case you drop a few of the roots. And the spinach also begins to turn a very bright or brilliant green, almost a more brilliant green than it was when it was raw. This is about done. Now, I've lost quite a bit of it. So I'll stick this in here first and go back and retrieve the rest. After you remove the spinach from the blanching water, drop it immediately into a bowl full of ice-cold water. I've got a bowl full of water here with some ice cubes in it. And what this does is it stops the cooking process immediately. Otherwise, you'll find if you skip this cold water step, what happens is if you just let the spinach sit, just the heat contained in the leaves continues to cook the spinach, and you lose this real brilliant green color. Continuing to hold the spinach by the roots, just take it and wring it out just like a rag, just like this, just to get all of the excess water out of it. And then go ahead and just cut it into little strips like this, about 1 or 2 inches in length. Don't get too close to the roots. And as you can see, that huge amount of spinach makes a tiny, tiny little bit of salad. And this gets topped off with 2 tablespoons of soy sauce and 2 teaspoons of honey and some toasted sesame seeds. This is 2 tablespoons of black toasted sesame seeds. And this can be served at room temperature or ice cold. Now let me show you a really elegant yet simple dessert that would go perfect with the sushi buffet. I call it a jeweled treasure dessert because of a lot of reasons. It really ends up looking like a jewel. And it's made with a honeydew melon primarily. And in Japan, honeydew melons are like treasures. When I was there a few years ago, 1 honeydew melon cost the equivalent of about $30 to $50, depending on the size of it. And a lot of times people will just buy a honeydew melon to take as a special gift to a friend that they're going to visit. It's kind of a real special event there to get a melon at all. Now what I've done to this melon is just peeled it. And you need to peel it so that you get all of that rind off. And that means going approximately 1/4 of an inch deep. And then to prepare the melon further, just cut a lid off at the end like this, so that you get just to the very top of the seed chamber. So you can see you're going to cut off maybe 1.5 inches up here. Then take a knife, a tinier one, and cut a hole right down the middle like this, so that you have about 1 inch between the outside edge of the melon and the core. And then just scoop the seeds and all the membranes out from the center of the melon. And then, of course, it's important to either have previously chilled this melon or to chill it after you de-seed it. But be sure and get all of the seeds out, because you don't want to end up serving someone a bite of a seed. Okay, and after all the seeds are out, you can also prepare a mandarin orange or a tangerine just by cutting it or peeling it and then demembraning every single section just by taking this outside membrane off and usually removing any seeds that are in there. So our fruit is ready, and now to fill the hollow of the melon, I'm going to bring a 1/4 cup of water to a boil here and put into it about 2 tablespoons of a vegetable gelatin. Now this vegetable gelatin is made with seaweed, and I prefer using this to the regular gelatin that you get in the stores, because that regular gelatin is made with usually ground up horse hooves or bones or cow hooves and bones, and is not a very palatable thought. So anyways, I use this vegetable gelatin that's made from seaweed, specifically carrageenan. And it doesn't have any taste. It doesn't taste like seaweed, but it does a nice job of thickening things up. Now once the water comes to a boil, the gelatin, the vegetable gelatin, dissolves very easily, as you can see. And at this point, just turn your heat off And you can add really any kind of a unsweetened juice to this, and it'll make a nice jello sort of dessert. But today I'm adding a natural lemon lime soda. This is, natural, meaning that it's not sweetened with white sugar. You can actually find some sodas on the market today that are either sweetened with fructose or just the fruit juice itself. Now this needs to be cooled in the refrigerator until it firms up. And I've got some already firmed up and gelled in here. And when it firms up and gels, it gets a lot of tiny little bubbles in it from the natural lemon lime soda. And into this, I'm going to fold about half a cup of these mandarin orange slices. Now this needs to be, as soon as it's folded in like that, put into the cavity of the prepared melon, and hopefully the melon is chilled up to this point. And once the cavity is filled, this whole thing needs to be chilled again until the gel inside really gets to thicken nicely. And of course, it's good to chill it inside of a bowl or something so it doesn't tilt and roll around a lot. And now let me show you what this looks like. If you look really closely, you cut it, to serve it, you cut it crosswise like this in about 1-inch thick slices. And this makes a real elegant oops. Sometimes it does that, but just put it back in and continue cutting the rest of the servings. But this makes a really elegant looking serving just like this. And it does look like a jewel. Now, of course, this beautiful jewel treasure of a dessert should be served at the last minute. Just take it out after the rest of the meal is done. Let's step to the table. And I'd like to show you a finished sushi buffet table and maybe give you some ideas for serving. Now, what I usually like to do is just get a little bit of the vegetables that are in season. And you can use fresh vegetables that are available in any grocery store, like freshly sliced tomatoes and very thin slivers of cucumbers or avocados. I've got some raw water chestnuts here. Actually, they're not raw, they're canned, so they've been cooked. And this is a vegetable also that's available in most grocery stores. It's a very finely shredded Japanese radish, which is the big, long white ones that are sometimes called daikon. And you can actually use some of the vegetables that went into the sushi salad just in individual little platters as well. But I also like to feature some of the Japanese type condiments that you don't use a whole lot of, like pickled radishes or plum paste. And you can you serve your sushi buffet in a couple of different ways. You can provide each serving place with a sushi roller and let each guest roll their own sushis. But this takes a little bit of skill. So it might be easier for everyone if you just provide little pieces of seaweed like this. And for people who are a little squeamish about seaweed, maybe little pieces of lettuce. So they can just make their own little finger sushis by taking out a little bit of rice and then putting in whatever they want on the table to make a little bite-sized sushi. So I'd like to leave you with this wonderful festive dinner party and also this wonderful food for thought. The ancient Chinese sage Lao Tzu said, "In fact, for all things there's a time for going ahead and a time for following behind. A time for slow breathing and a time for fast breathing. A time to grow in strength and a time to decay. A time to be up and a time to be down. Therefore, the sage is not disturbed by such changes any more than by the changing of seasons.
To get your copy of Kathy's new book, The Art of Dieting Without Dieting, send a check or money order for $14, which includes postage and handling, to Kathy's Kitchen, P.O. Box 1122, Glendale, California 91209. If you prefer to use your MasterCard or Visa, call toll-free 1-800-772-7272. Please allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery.